Hey, how you doing? Welcome, Sports Therapy Association podcast, episode 82. Happy New Year. I better start off by saying that. Does anyone remember that we had a new year recently? For anyone like me, it's the fourth now, and it's like it never happened at all, is it? It's all business as usual, things are happening, and I almost feel guilty thrusting this episode upon you because I always like to tell people, have a nice gentle ease into the year, but I'm so excited, and it's going to be great. And we're starting off January on the topic of CrossFit. And prepare yourselves because our speakers are in the middle of a very busy gym in South London. You're going to hear the hustle bustle happening this very moment behind their live direct just to get your adrenaline rushing up. As always, you are welcome to join us live, whether you go to the Facebook page, Sports Therapy Association Facebook page, or you can go to YouTube. And if you do join us live, then I can do things like bringing up young Becky Carroll here onto the screen. And Becky Carroll saying, Happy New Year, everyone, in her Russian hat. You can't see this if you listen to the podcast, but it's nice if you join us live because you can network, you can hang out. We've had 50 to 60 people for the last 82 weeks without fail. It's been a beautiful thing. But of course, if you can't join us at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, then that's no problem at all. We obviously appreciate you downloading the podcast and sharing it with others. If you do enjoy the podcast, do please leave a rating and share it. The ratings in particular on Apple Podcasts just help us increase our appearance in Google results. So it's really important if you do take the time just to leave a little rating on, especially if you're on an iPhone. If you're on an iPhone, you've got no excuse. It's just 20 seconds. If you're on Android, you've got to go into iTunes and, I don't know, sing the Lord's Prayer or something. It's very difficult. But on iPhones, it's very simple. So do leave us a rating. Hey, Becky, hi to you. Catherine Reimer's here as well. Hey, Happy New Year. Stevie Barr's in the house. Right, that's the most important thing. I think we can start the show now. Thanks for joining us live. Let us know if you're on YouTube as always. You don't have to come to the Facebook page. You're welcome to join us on YouTube. Right, before we start, I've already said that this month is all about CrossFit. This is a new thing. In case you're new to the Sports Therapy Association podcast, a video cast, it is recorded live. And what we've started as of December is we're doing like a topic each month because I want to increase the shelf life of a particular topic. The first 80 episodes were amazing, but they darted from maybe female pelvic health over to something else and then back to male pelvic health. And then it was something to do with something else. And it was all a little bit amazing episodes, but there wasn't this consistency, which we preach to our clients all the time. So I had this idea. We had this idea from an STA meeting. We all got our brains together and we thought every month we do a subject so you can create a little bit more of a shelf life. You can talk about it. So in December, it was all about fascia. We had some fantastic guests. It's all available on YouTube if you like the video, or you can download the podcast as normal. It was really interesting at Therapy Expo where I actually met face-to-face my guest tonight for the first time. One of the questions in the STA theatre was, and how do we listen to this podcast? And it just reminded me that not everybody knows what we know. We are a little bubble. I couldn't believe someone was asking me, how do we get this thing called a podcast? I was like, well, just get your phone, download the app. We're there everywhere, all popular apps. So it was a nice wake-up call and everyone's on the same page. So yeah, here we are. This January, we are talking about CrossFit, something I've had, I think I said in a video the other day, a hate-hate relationship with since about 2010. So I'm really looking forward to this because I know that it's going to challenge some of my biases. And in fact, my beliefs have changed as I followed it. And like I said in the video I did the other day, CrossFit for me represents something which is dear to our heart here on the Sports Therapy Association podcast. It's evolution. It's changed from the early days. And we're going to listen to two great guests who, like I say, I had the pleasure of chairing one of their talks at Therapy Expo this year. Robert Crowley, who a lot of you will know for probably different reasons. Some of them we won't even need to talk about, but you might know him as a rock doc. He's a senior rock doc instructor. Some of you know him from there. Some of you know him as the chiropractor. Some of you know him as the CrossFit, the powerlifter, the muscles from, not from Brussels, the muscles from, can't remember where he's from in the States now. The muscles from Norwich. But yeah, you will probably have seen him around a lot. And I had the pleasure of listening to a presentation by Rob and also Sonia, who I've never met before, Sonia Fierro, who I'm not even going to start talking about the list of things that Sonia's done in the sport she's been involved in and the title she holds. I'm going to wait. She can talk to you all about that when she comes up. But together they form a really exciting start to January, all about CrossFit. I'm really excited to bring them on. As always, if you've got questions, then feel free to bring them up in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or on Facebook. I think that's it. I don't think I've got any housekeeping to do. Gary is in the house as well. STA Gary is the founder of the Sports Therapy Association, in case you are new to here. So Gary's the man to talk to if you've got any questions about the association. But I think that is good enough presentation-wise in terms of letting you know what we are and what we do. Yes, let's bring up the guests. In no particular order, I introduced to you Robert Crowley and Sonia Fierro. Hi, guys.
Hi everyone.
How you doing? I was just explaining, you're actually both in, is it your gym, Sonia, in London?
Yes, Fit and Fitness in London. Robert is there. I'm actually not at the moment.
Oh, Robert's in your gym. You trust him with the keys?
I'm there. For some reason, my camera's not working at the moment. It was working a moment ago.
Yeah, so. I think it's something Sonia's done. I think she just wants the limelight for the moment. What I suggest is, what I'll do, Rob, is I will cross you out and just come in again. So I'll make you leave. It's nothing personal.
Okay, yep.
Remove and then come join us. So Sonia, you've left him alone in your gym. Is that because you've worked with him for a while? You trust the guy?
Yeah, of course I do. Of course.
Where is the gym? Is it South London? Is it?
Yes, it is in Elephant and Castle. It's 2 minutes from the train station in Elephant and Castle, so quite central.
Fantastic. And you've had it for a while?
It's been 3 years now. Yeah, we've just celebrated our 3 years anniversary with CrossFit.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So whilst this is quite cool, actually, that Rob's not here, because it's going to take us about 10 minutes to get through your accomplishments and the various sports you've worked in. I'm really excited that you are representing, in a way, CrossFit tonight, because you have been involved in quite a nice, diverse selection of sports. Tell us a little bit about them without being shy. Tell us about all your accolades. What have you been involved in?
Yeah, I've been working with a few different sports. So I started with CrossFit. It's kind of how I actually got into therapy. I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit of the history later, but getting involved myself for my own training. At the time, there was a lot of talk about mobility and movement, and I've always been an athlete, so I've been really interested in that. I was getting really fed up with office job. So I requalified as a sports therapist first, and now osteopath. And yeah, I started working within CrossFit. Then I actually moved my own training into weightlifting, and then lately into powerlifting. So these are the three main sports I've been working with. But then in my sports therapist career, I've also worked with other sports, so diving, some swimming athletes, and most recently with British fencing as well.
Fantastic. And people can't see at the moment, all they can see is kind of your head and shoulders. People are watching us live, but you actually hold a little bit of a record as well, don't you? Which I love talking about. I know you must get sick of it, but what's your current record?
A little bit, yeah. I've been competing in powerlifting in the last few years. I've been mainly going back from competing in Italy, and I hold the deadlift record for my category. 188 on the platform, a little bit more in the gym as a 57 lifter.
Fantastic, great. So like I say, brilliant to have you along tonight. Rob is just having a little bit of problems with his camera at the moment, so we'll talk to you at the moment and let Rob introduce himself when he comes back. So as I kind of mentioned in the introduction, I'm a bit biased with CrossFit because basically I'm quite old, and it was about probably before 2010, maybe 2007, when I started reading about some of the claims they were putting out back then. I look after runners, so there was a little bit of a kind of a duel going on, obviously polarized as always between the famous running coaches. I think Steve Magnus got involved against Brian McKenzie about CrossFit endurance because claims were being made. At the time, I don't know how, obviously you're not as old as me, which is clear if anyone who's watching the show live, but have you seen a change in CrossFit, or are you aware of something from when it first started to some of the bolder claims and the energy behind it compared to where it is today?
Yeah, I think as a brand especially has really evolved. CrossFit, when it started, was around 2001 with Greg Glassman. A lot of the people he surrounded himself with came from military background. So a lot of the emphasis was on going hard, really high intensity workout, and a lot of the branding and the marketing was kind of targeting to that extreme. And we've come a really, really long way from that. And they have actually, in the last couple of years, completely changed that, and now they are really focusing on CrossFit health. So there were a lot of videos with an older population, etc. That's always been present, like since day one. There's always been a lot of scaling and a lot of adaptations, and really trying to show people that this was just a methodology of how you can train, and is really effective, and is really good for a wide variety of populations. But it probably didn't came up into their marketing as much as is today. With the endurance debate, I think it's one of those things where there were a lot of sub-brands of CrossFit at one point. And as most brands out there, they make bold claims, big statements, but it's never that black and white. You can never, just pick one principle or one exercise or one discipline that will solve all your problems. And I think that's probably what you kind of went against a little bit, because I know the claims that CrossFit Endurance at the time was making is that you just need a CrossFit to run marathons, ultramarathon, etc., which of course is probably not quite right. I'm pretty sure there's athletes that could train 100% CrossFit and show up to a marathon and finish it. But then if you want to be beating your time and become a really good marathon runner or ultra marathons, you will need some different training, of course. So it's like anything else. It's like you want to compete in weightlifting. Yeah, you can learn weightlifting in CrossFit classes, but you're probably not going to be the best weightlifter you can be by just doing CrossFit. It's always, those gray areas that nobody really likes to talk about in the social media world.
It's a good way. It's a very nice, relaxed way of talking about it. No one likes talking about the grey. It's true, and I've probably been guilty of that as well in the past. One thing I am interested in though, and again, it's kind of linked in. Is it? I don't know how many. I think I read somewhere there's about 50. When in 2020 there was something like 15,000 affiliated CrossFit gyms or something. It's just massive now. But I imagine there's still. Is the idea that every time you go into a CrossFit gym, you're going to get the same thing, or is there a natural variance depending on the owner and what they believe in?
There is definitely variance. So CrossFit is not a franchise like some other brands out there. So some of the franchises out there are really HQ directed, and the programming will come from their HQ, and it will be the same for all the locations. But with CrossFit, it's actually an affiliation scheme. So every gym is an independent business, so with no real connection to any other CrossFit, even around their area. There's some owners that own more than one box, so one gym, but they are mostly independent, and the program and the philosophy and what you find can definitely be really, really different. And again, like in everything, you will have really good boxes with really good programming and super knowledgeable coaches, and you will have other locations where maybe the programming is not as good because the coaches are more like kind of part-time coaches. Maybe it's not their only their one career. Maybe they have not been in the game as long. I think it's a bit like everything else again.
So in a sense, then it doesn't really make much sense kind of criticizing CrossFit as one word. It's like saying I can't stand the United States, because it's like not everybody in the United States is this one kind of American person. There's all different, obviously different states and things. So it's different. You can't tar the whole of CrossFit with one brush, can you?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that the majority of people out there don't quite understand. They think, oh, CrossFit is that one thing, and all CrossFit is good or all CrossFit is bad. Again, you can't really say. It's still going to depend, gym by gym, like everything else. Again, like let's say boxing. You can't say boxing is good or is bad for you. Will depend on the gym where you go and train. With running, like your coach, may have 2 days experience and they just want to do that because they enjoy running, or maybe somebody with 20 years experience that has coached multiple athletes in multiple events of every single distance. But when we talk about CrossFit, it's more, I think, talking about the philosophy and the ideology behind the brand, which since day one has always been like extremely good, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased, but there's actually a lot of things that I didn't like in the last few years about, what their marketing and what their brand has done. But the essential philosophy of it, I think, is great for everyone, and for your average person that just wants to be fit, it's probably one of the best philosophies out there for training.
Great. I'm just going to bring up Rob to see if you can see him, because my heart's just bleeding. Let me bring him up and see if you can see him. Maybe it's just me who can't see him. I'm staring at an empty screen. Can you see him at all?
Yeah, unfortunately, just an empty screen.
Oh, hold on.
Oh,
whoa.
There he is.
I'm back.
Hey, here we are. We've been having a lovely time talking about you, Rob. Yeah, we know all about you. You don't need to say anything. So if you listen to the podcast, then fortunately now we have Rob in vision and sound. So fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Rob. Sorry about that. Don't know what it was. Gremlin in the machine. So we've been talking about Sonia's. Obviously, it was a good job we said that you kind of were away for a while, because Sonia's listed all her achievements, which took about 10 minutes, with all the trophies and cups. It was great. And we've just talked about how the early kind of representation of CrossFit was a bit kind of Body Beautiful meathead, and it was a bit advertising as well to try and get its place, and that's how you advertise, isn't it? You drop these kind of tags and things. But it's definitely changed now, and we just basically said how you can't tar CrossFit with one brush, because even there's going to be natural variance between gyms. You've been in it for a while. When was the first time you started experimenting with CrossFit? Because you were originally from bodybuilding, all right?
Yeah, so I was a competitive bodybuilder for a number of years in the 80s and 90s when I was quite young. I'm quite old now. But when I was about 41 years old, so that was about 2013, I started CrossFit. And I went to CrossFit as a very stiff bodybuilder who've had a number of knee surgeries, back injuries, things of that nature. And then I started CrossFit, and it was one of the
We'll never know. No. We'll never know what happened to the if you listen to the podcast, I'm afraid Robert just disappeared. Damn. If you haven't seen any pictures of Robert, I mean, I've met him in person now thanks to Therapy Expo, and he's obviously stacked. He's like biceps huge. But then there's a photo I saw the other day. I did a little kind of like looking on Facebook and things, and if you check out Robert Crowley with his shirt off, then you'll understand he definitely came from a bodybuilding background. You will absolutely stacked. But anyway, so we'll wait till you come back, Rob, and we'll see how that turns out. I think he might be back now. Let me just see if his camera appears. There we are. Okay, you're back. You're back.
I'm back.
Okay, fantastic. Rob's back with us. So yes, you were saying you came from bodybuilding. You noticed that.
No, gone again.
What's going on? I don't know what's going on. Okay, well, we will wait until Robert comes back. One word that does come up, and again, this might not be on everybody's mind unless they've got a few years on them, but one of the kind of famous criticisms of CrossFit back in the day, and I'm not going to be totally negative about CrossFit, I just want to paint the dark side to show how it's evolved, which we'll move on to shortly. But some people out there, if I said to you Uncle Rhabdo, is that something that happens in your gym, or is that like just a bit of a myth now?
So I don't think it's a myth. Is a condition that can develop and can develop in a lot of different sports. I've only ever come across two athletes. One is elite athlete, regionals, that experienced that, and I know of one person from a box, not from our gym, that experienced that after doing a known program from his gym, so an additional workout. So for people that are following and they don't know what we are talking about, maybe I'll explain quickly, but rhabdomyolysis is a condition that you can develop when essentially intensity and volume are too high and you have too much breakdown of muscles, and then that builds up in your bloodstream and your kidneys can't get rid of that long enough, like fast enough. I think it was associated with CrossFit because it's one of the first methodologies that use really high intensity and really high volume. But I actually think that it was a really good shout of, like, from CrossFit, of bringing that up, because that's not as prevalent in normal gyms, CrossFit gyms, or in CrossFit in general, as it is, for example, in ultra running, or even in people that start spinning after years of not doing anything, and they just join a normal gym and spin, and they develop that. So I think it's actually been really good of CrossFit, of making coaches and box owners and people aware this is something you could potentially develop. So you need to be careful about, the volume that you're doing, the intensity that you're using. And if you see these signs, you need to be aware that it's something potentially dangerous, you need to get checked. Whereas other sports kind of hide it away. And I don't really talk about it. And unless you are professional or elite, you don't really hear about this. So gladly we came away from, pukey and ankle rhabdo, etc. for marketing, because it doesn't help, the general box owner for sure, or therapist or coach. But I think there was some good in doing something like that, and showing that this is something that can happen, and I want to inform you that this is something that can happen, rather than hiding it away.
Yeah, and again, now I'm older, I've looked into a little bit more into what CrossFit's actually about, then I've read and noticed that CrossFit actually do raise awareness of this rhabdomyolysis, and they produce things in their advisory pamphlets which they give members and affiliates and stuff, and they've been involved in studies, and they even claim that the reason that the Uncle Rhabdo character, which I think was this kind of like cartoon clown hooked up to a dialysis machine or something, which became kind of captured by somebody who didn't like CrossFit or saw them as competition and posted it everywhere. Even that, in theory, was supposed to be a reminder of watch out, because this could happen to you, which is, I don't know whether that's true or not, but it was kind of always about being aware of these things. But it can happen in lots of sports. I think it was just unfortunate that, I think in 2005, someone in the States managed to sue a CrossFit trainer or something because they managed to contract this, and whether it was causation or correlation, I don't know, but they got a few grand out of it, a few $100,000. So, and that kind of just became, apparently now everybody who does CrossFit is in danger of getting this. But good. Okay, well, we're past that. Robert, I'm intrigued now you're back. I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening about you getting kicked out.
But yeah, I'm back.
I'm afraid to have you talk now. Maybe it's just the talking that makes you disappear, but we'll see. So yeah, you were going back to where you started relatively late, coming from weightlifting, with the natural kind of reduced mobility you associate with loads of kind of heavy lifting, slow kind of pumping up your body. Yeah, so it was difficult for you why did you want to do CrossFit? Why didn't you just stay doing your bodybuilding?
I was doing bodybuilding I had been doing bodybuilding for about 25 years, and it was just getting boring to me. I was going to the gym and doing similar things, and just wasn't getting a stimulus. I went to my first CrossFit induction, and I actually got sick, and that wasn't the reason why I really wanted to do CrossFit, but it made me feel different than I felt doing bodybuilding. That I've been doing bodybuilding, the same stimulus for 25 years. But because I was doing bodybuilding, I was doing more slow, controlled type movements, trying to learn to move my body in a different way, in a multitude of different ways, whether it is Olympic weightlifting, which I had never done before, gymnastics type movements. I've done I would do strict pull-ups and things like that, but I never did a handstand or a handstand press up or, box jumps and, things like that. And I enjoyed it. But at the same time, I was sort of like taking it all in and trying to empathize with an older person, coming to CrossFit. I don't like to refer to myself as an older person, but I'm coming to that conclusion after I turned 50. But more and more people now are actually coming to CrossFit who aren't necessarily athletes, and they're the average person, the average, beginning gym goer, and that presents a whole other set of issues, introducing them to exercise, but then introducing them to something as complex as CrossFit.
Right, so I'm excited by that, because while you were off, I was saying to Sonia, I'm purposely starting talking about the negative old school thing which is associated with CrossFit, because I do worry that a lot of people still have that image of CrossFit. So now we can move on to how CrossFit has changed, and you provided that segue nicely by saying that people out of that normal military population now getting into CrossFit. So my next question to both of you is, for soft tissue therapists out there, what would be some reasons for maybe suggesting CrossFit to some of their clients as opposed to other forms of exercise? Essentially, I suppose we're talking about strength training and mobility, but why CrossFit? What are some of the signs we think this person might benefit from CrossFit?
I mean, so the big advantage of CrossFit is well, it's defined as constantly varied functional activity performed at high intensity, and the big thing is varied. So you're not necessarily stressing the same things with each workout. You're getting a variety of different things, and it's not all going to be weight training. It's going to expose you to the cardiovascular training. It's going to expose you to more ballistic plyometric stuff. Strength training, gymnastics, etc. So it's a variety of movements. So you're not necessarily stressing the same things every time. One thing I preach to my patients is to move in a variety of ways. If somebody's a runner, I'm going to recommend that maybe they try a little strength training, or maybe they try some yoga, or maybe they try Pilates. Just move in a lot of different ways with a lot of different loads, different intensities, different time durations, and so on. I think sometimes we get into, like, I was in bodybuilding for a number of years, so I had that same stimulus all the time. And in order to actually progress and change, but then also keep it interesting, you need a variety of things. And I think that's the biggest aspect of CrossFit is it's a variety of different things, and it's play. And our movement should be fun. As adults, we don't play, but when you get somebody who's performing a pull-up or getting upside down in a handstand, from like a neurological perspective, it's a new stimulus, but it's fun. Plus, it gives you the sense of accomplishment. When you have, like, let's say you have a 40-year-old woman who's never done gymnastics in their life, and all of a sudden we're able to get them upside down in a handstand. That's a really valuable stimulus, and it's an accomplishment for them. So that's just going to motivate them to continue to move, provided that it's in the right intensity, the right load at the right times, and so on. Really
nice. Sonia, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Rob basically covered it all, but the really good thing about CrossFit is that, again, going back to what I said earlier, is about that philosophy. And CrossFit has always been based on the 10 components of fitness. So the idea was never to be the best at one single component. I don't want to be the strongest I can be and not being able to, run for a flight of stairs because I never do any cardiovascular exercise, but I want to grab something from each component. So we have strength, we have agility, power, speed, cardiovascular, and then you have all your balance, coordination, and flexibility, etc. So that's the beauty of CrossFit, and that's where the benefit lies. You move your body, as Rob was saying, in a variety of different ways, and then also a lot of emphasis in CrossFit boxes is about full range of movement. So we want you to be able to squat all the way down, not just a quarter squat, that has shown to have benefits on your joints and on your movement in general. So CrossFit is usually considered functional training, and this word functional, sometimes I have a few issues with, because it's used out of context, but it's also can be really interesting way of training, and it's basically trying to get people more able to move their bodies in different ways and in different ranges. And if you're somebody that is always sitting at a desk and they never raise, you never raise your arms above your head, because nothing that you do requires you to, eventually you're going to lose that range of motion. But if we introduce you to a training methodology that now has overhead lifting, of course, as Rob was saying, we need to introduce it carefully. We need to use the right volume, intensity, and make sure that we really take it step by step. But then we're reintroducing the range, and now you're not going to lose the ability to do that movement, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. And then there's, again, that kind of buy-in and having fun and learning something new that we don't have with some other sports and some other activities.
I think that's really interesting, and probably the success of any methodology which a client chooses, the best one for them is the one that they enjoy, because we're aware of that, aren't we? We're aware that that's going to help with consistency and still doing the exercise, of progressing, of playing, because of how we develop as kids. So yeah, very, very interesting. What about this idea? Because we haven't talked about it yet, because if you look into CrossFit, especially from the old days, the idea is you're mixing two concepts which traditionally don't really fit together very well, lifting something heavy and doing it as fast as possible, as many times as possible in a short period of time. Now, a lot of old school would say, well, those two don't get together. I mean, if you're doing, like from your bodybuilding days, if you're doing heavy sets, then you need at least 2 minutes rest in between to, increase your reserves and get that kind of energy systems back, and then you've got enough strength to do the next heavy set. So where's this idea? What's the background to, one, from a performance perspective and the benefits from it, and two, what about the dangers of trying to lift something really heavy against the clock?
I think a lot of it comes back to, a lot of injuries happen just from doing too much too soon after doing too little for too long. Like a perfect example is lockdown. The toughest thing is as everybody was coming back into the gym, is they wanted to make up for those 6-7 months that they're 3-4 or whatever the lockdown was of not doing anything, which is very similar to New Year's as well. But there is that. So you have the Olympic lifting purists or powerlifting purists who don't recommend any more than 3 repetitions. But in terms of CrossFit and longer sets of, let's say, power snatches or power cleans and things like that, there is some danger involved in that, especially if the weight is too much. The member isn't proficient enough to do something correctly. But barbell cycling and doing a number of repetitions, there is an art and there is a technique to do that in order to do it safely. When I started CrossFit, if I had a workout that had a number of deadlifts, I used to notice that my back hurt a little bit more. But when I learned to cycle a barbell properly in a deadlift, and the biggest cue that somebody gave me was think of pushing the floor away. And now, like today, I just did 8 repetitions of 130 kilos deadlift today in a workout, and my back doesn't hurt. And partially because I learned how to move that weight properly. And I earned my way working up to that weight. So it's really important just having that, having the technique, then building the strength. And then you can work on, working it into a workout. And that's where the coach comes in, and having a good coach that's going to take the time to teach you properly, but then give you the right cues and the right load in order to perform it effectively.
Okay,
Yeah,
and we see,
sure.
and this word scaling, I mean, I like scaling translates nicely to what we learn about progression and regression, and it's kind of a strategic part, isn't it, of especially in rehab and things like that. So that's very applicable in CrossFit. Like you said, Sonia, it's always been there, hasn't it? This idea of making sure it's an appropriate load and appropriate exercise.
Yes, exactly. This is something that I think wasn't, or people outside of CrossFit have never been as aware of, but it's been there since day one. So the founder of CrossFit, like Greg Glassman, had this quote that it was saying that an elite athlete and our grandparents' needs don't differ. They just differ by degree, not by kind. So you still have to move your body. You still need to get stronger. You still, need to have your cardiovascular endurance, etc. But of course, the workout is not going to be exactly the same for somebody that's been doing CrossFit for 10 years. Or, the classic example is the CrossFit Games. Everybody kind of gets exposed to CrossFit because of the CrossFit Games or videos online. But I can take a workout that's been kind of made for the games and change that, so scale it down in a way that is still appropriate for somebody that shows up to my gym and they've not done any training for the past 5 years. Of course, they won't be doing the same weights. They may not even do the same movement itself. So if I have a 70 years old that wants to start CrossFit and the workout of the day is let's take one of the classic workouts that is Karen, that is 150 wall balls. For that 70 years old, the workout won't be 150 wall balls with the standard weight. It may just be you are going to sit down on a box and stand up 30 times. So I'll change the intensity, I'll change the weight, I'll change the volume. But the output that that person will have to produce at their level and for their needs is going to be the same that I will feel if I do the workout as prescribed. Hope this makes sense. So that's where scaling comes in, and as the Rob was saying, the coach comes in. And I think people that are not in CrossFit don't often understand this. If you go to a normal class and you jump into any class and you say that something hurts or that you can't do a movement, they'll either tell you not to do it and skip it, or, well, just do a little bit less weight but keep going. There's not really that kind of personalization around what you're doing, which we're quite big on in CrossFit. Changing exercises, not just by lowering the weight, but by trying to basically gain the same effect for that person based on where they are at that particular moment.
Very nice. I like that. I'm gonna have to get you to send me that, or I'll look it up. The difference between a grandmother and like an elite athlete is just the degrees. Yeah, I like that. I can relate to that. How much of one of the parts of CrossFit is obviously the competing part of it and going along to competitions? Is that something which is part of the ethos which you try and get everybody to kind of get involved in, almost like doing your grading for martial arts? Is that something which all members get involved in, or do they not have to?
Yeah, they don't have to. And there's a lot that, like the reason why I started competing was because I used to play, sports growing up. Well, I used to compete in bodybuilding, but then I used to play soccer in America. You call it football here. And American football, things like that. But I was missing that competitive aspect or something to shoot for. So I started competing just to have get that competitive competitive experience. It's open for members. There's different competitions around the country, and they're all different levels, from a novice, intermediate to elite, to people who compete in the CrossFit Games. So just like a class, things are scaled, toward the ability. So if you're in your first competition, you're going to go into, sort of a novice, beginner type competition. There's team competitions. The biggest aspect I've found with competing is just, I've met CrossFitters from, all over the UK. I've competed in competitions over in Europe. But then, Sonia and I we met working in Copenhagen at the CrossFit Regionals about 6 or 7 years ago. It's the community around CrossFit, and it's that common. It's just like a runner. You're running a marathon. The person running next to you is going through exactly the same experience as you, and you get community and relationships, and it's a social aspect of it that I think keeps people coming back, or they get to meet everybody in class. I was just at Sonia's gym, P10 Fitness, today. And I was watching the members come. They just came back after Christmas, and they're all, chatting away. What'd you do at Christmas? Where'd you go? Some of them went away, some stayed home, etc. And there was that bond and that the social aspect of CrossFit. I think that is sort of like is the secret sauce. And I think a lot of people. Sometimes people, when they get into the competition, they start to pull themselves away from the box community and start to do their own little workouts and their own programming, and they end up missing that aspect of it, because that's what made them love CrossFit, was the community aspect of everything.
Very nice, which again is going to help with consistency. We know that exercising with others has loads of benefits, which are more likely to keep you going, because you think, if I don't go tonight, so and so is going to ask me where I am, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I like it. I like the parallels with running as well. Although of course with running, I guess it's easier to overdo it with running, at least with CrossFit. I suppose you can do it at home, but there's a little bit more where you've got to wait for your club to be open, or all CrossFit gyms kind of 24 hours and you go and do it yourself. Or because that's one of the problems with CrossFit, isn't it? It's easy because it is competitive, and there's that ability to overdo it quite easily. You can do too much. How do you manage to control that? How do you convince people that they shouldn't be necessarily in their shoes, be doing it every day? Or
I think that really depends on the culture that you create at your own gym, or the culture in the gym where you go. There are definitely some boxes that are a little bit more competitors focused, and a lot of boxes that are really not like that. We don't really push people to compete unless they say they want to. But again, it's down to the coaching and the culture that you create, because if you create a culture where everyone just needs to focus on themselves and just improve from what they did in the past. And for example, we have a tracking app where everybody can record their scores and their weights, etc. So when we are doing workouts, they're basing the weights they're using on what they did in the past, and it's always on themselves, and trying not to look at the person next to them. You will always have, people that are a little bit more egos, and, they be trying to do that. But if the coach is good and, directs the class, you can avoid that. It's definitely not the general culture. A lot of boxes are coming away from the leaderboard as well. So there is trying to get away from that competition between members, so that you can focus on your own performance.
And as a chiropractor in 2 CrossFit boxes, I treat a lot of the athletes that do compete. And one of my, I have busted a number of athletes after a weekend competition. A lot of times they get that high from the competition, and then I see them in the gym on Monday. They know that I don't want to see them in the gym for if they've done a weekend competition. I don't want to see them until at least Thursday, but I usually recommend that they take a whole week off. There are people who it can become an addiction, just like running marathons or doing triathlons and things, where they start to do too many. and then they begin to break down. So there is a lot of stress in competing, especially at like CrossFit Games. They have 5 days of different events, doing 15 to 20 workouts, and a typical CrossFit Games athlete, they may take off a whole month after the CrossFit Games in order just to let their bodies recover. But recovery is hugely important, and then a lot of times people get a little bit too excited about it, especially in the beginning where they're training 3-4 days and they think, oh, I wonder if I'd make more progress if I train 5, 6, 7 days a week. And then that's where they overtrain. I have a philosophy that the body usually always gets what it needs, and one of the ways it gets it is an injury or an illness. If you're not stopping, your body will find a way to make you stop.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of boxes, if I can add that, are also because there's a lot more education about programming nowadays for CrossFit itself. A lot of boxes are also integrating kind of, let's say, forced rest days, or at least lower intensity days into their own programming, so that if they can't sometimes you can't get across to everyone, you will have those 1-2 members that no matter how many times you tell them they have to take days off and rest, they show up every day. But a lot of boxes are now starting to do days that is maybe just conditioning and there's no heavy weights. Sundays may have program only mobility work. They may have just bodybuilding type training. So again, there's no high intensity, there is no excessive push. So you have 1 or 2 days during the week that are a little bit lower volume, a little bit lower intensity, so that even if somebody trains every day, they get a little bit of a mini deload in the week. And a lot of boxes are starting to integrate in cycles as well, so that if you are building the weights over a few weeks, and you have somebody that trains every day and constantly, they will have a deload week because they will be programmed, and for that week they won't push the weights as much. That's part of the sport, how it's evolving, etc., and added education and all sorts.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely come a long way. And I think hopefully people listening to this who haven't kind of done the same old thing, have just kind of gone with the myths and misconceptions from years and years ago, hopefully this is enlightening people as to how CrossFit has changed. I want to spend the last kind of 10-15 minutes on giving some tips to soft therapists about, you guys are from a CrossFit background, which makes it really useful. When you're a coach and a therapist, it's like the ideal combination, is that you're into the mind of the client or patient in front of you. There's a question here which kind of links to that from Stevie Barr. Thanks for the question, Stevie. Stevie says, are eating disorders prevalent in CrossFit? Have you come across that at all?
I have. Any type of exercise, or you go into any gym and you're going to have the compulsive exercisers, and for the same reason where let's say exercising in the gym or running or anything becomes compulsive and they do too much of it, it can become an illness. On the other end, I have seen people who had past history of eating disorders, and they have found CrossFit as the method of coming back from that. Because one of the beauties of let's say if you take somebody who has anorexia and they're trying to survive on very little calories, one of the things you can't do with CrossFit is eat very little and do CrossFit. So it almost, in a lot of ways, it forces them to eat better or eat more. But then a lot of coaches spend time educating them on how to eat properly, but then also the correct amount. We were talking about the correct amount of load and intensity, etc. And the structure of CrossFit actually replaces that structure of their eating disorder in a lot of ways. Provided that person, of course, is monitored, whether it is, by their physician. But it can potentially benefit done properly. But and any type of extreme exercise, you're going to get, the people with, potential eating disorders. But then also other body dysmorphia issues on the other end of the spectrum, the people who are, just more concerned with, building muscle and things like that, which can be, just as compulsive.
I guess when people are focusing on technique for certain exercises, as opposed to just watching their biceps kind of engorge and in a mirror, there's something to take your mind away from the visual.
Well, that was the biggest thing when I started doing it. Is I remember I saw pictures of 5-6 months. I did a competition, and one of the nice things about competition is everybody watches Facebook and Instagram for their pictures to come up after a competition, and I wasn't concerned with the vanity aspect of it. But then I saw pictures, and I'm like, wow, my six-pack is back.
I've seen that picture. Yeah, looking good.
Things like that. I think over the holidays, it's gone away a little bit. But it's you worry about the work as opposed to the vanity, and there's no mirrors in a CrossFit gym.
I was going to ask that. Interesting.
So there's no mirrors. So from a kinesthetic principle, the athlete or the member learns to go by feel as opposed to looking in a mirror. Of course, a lot of people will take videos of their lifts and things like that. But you still have to, even if it's in a video, you still have to learn how to do a squat by feel, or deadlift, or snatch, or clean and jerk by feel. I think that adds to some of the benefit as well.
Yeah, definitely the culture around CrossFit has always been to kind of step away from the really static focused training, and it's more about how you feel, how are you sleeping, how is your overall health, which are all really good things, especially if somebody, as Rob was saying, is recovering from an eating disorder. And for example, if we take the female population, and I was in that group as well, I didn't want to get too big, too muscly, too bulky, but a lot of the trends around CrossFit are you want to perform better, and your body's strong, and there's beauty in strength, and there's beauty in strength in all sizes, because some of us are still quite slim like I am, and some people develop muscles a lot easier, but it doesn't matter, because we are all different and we're still focusing on our own performance, and I think that's really good for the average person that feels intimidated sometimes going to a normal gym, where the people that are addicted to training are all in front of the mirrors and looking at what they're doing, looking at themselves in the mirrors. They come to a CrossFit gym and everybody's just high-fiving and asking how their holiday was, and how they're feeling, and taking an interest in them as a person and their life, and not how they look. So that's a really positive thing about CrossFit for sure.
All sounds very healthy, very much so. I love the idea of making sure that people are talking about recovery and sleep and nutrition. Everything's kind of put together to be able to perform. That sounds like a really healthy environment. So as therapists then, I mean, in future episodes, unfortunately we're running out of time for tonight, so we haven't had time to talk about specific injuries and that, but I'm interested in finishing off on just the subjective part of when somebody comes in and they've got an injury and they do CrossFit. What are some of the questions which you already kind of in your mind thinking, I need to make sure that I ask this question because this is probably how they've injured themselves? What do you have when you get a CrossFit athlete who's injured?
The biggest question I'll ask as far as, what their training looks like, how many days a week they're training, how long they're training, whether or not they're on like an online program versus if they're a member in in a CrossFit box where I practice, I generally have known them and I know what they do, but I'm going to ask them specifically as far as, what they're doing. I've already have an idea generally of how they're moving and things like that. So the big thing is going to be the load, the training load. couple of years back, I even had a patient with rhabdo that I had to send to A&E in my office. And the biggest thing is I knew what his load was. I knew how he moved, but then I put that together with the subjective and what he told me. And I thought it was a situation where he had to go to A&E and get some blood work done, and he ended up having rhabdo. So the load's going to be the biggest thing that I'm going to look at.
And for therapists who, I mean, you're both involved in it, so you could look at someone's load and work out whether that's sensible or not, and you can take their case history. But if you're not involved in it yourself, is it something where maybe you should be working with CrossFit coaches and maybe forming a relationship to show them what I've got this client doing this? Does it look a bit too much to you or something, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, I definitely recommend having, if you're interested in treating CrossFit athletes, is to have a relationship with the coaches. So if you're going to be, obviously, you're going to be in a CrossFit box, and let's say you're practicing in a CrossFit box, you're going to have that. But you still have to have those open lines of communication. Educate the coaches as well about various issues. But then if somebody is injured, to talk to them about scaling, talk to them about adjusting the load or adjusting duration and the different factors. But the big thing is having a relationship with the coach. But if you are interested as a therapist of working with CrossFit athletes, first thing I would say is just join a box and do CrossFit. Not only to learn about it, but you are going to meet a lot of people who at some point may ask for your help. And CrossFit is just as a little community, and they always refer to their mates and everything. So it's great for practice building.
Good thinking. And Sonia, what sort of things are you looking for? Someone's come to you injured and they do CrossFits. What are you looking out for?
Yeah, so volume is always, I think, the first thing, trying to understand how much they're doing also outside the gym, because a lot of people will then have additional training sessions outside the scheduled classes. So it's really important to understand if they do anything else. So for example, some people combine that with running, and if we have a lower limb injury and they're doing classes and strength training plus they're going running, of course that volume suddenly becomes a lot more. And then I think is trying to understand whether there are specific exercises that seem to be causing the issue. And a question I often ask is trying to understand why they think they have developed that pain, because a lot of people will have heard something or will have seen something online and they think that there is a specific reason why they are hurting, and they maybe almost try to scale or rehab themselves even before they come to you. And it's really important to understand if that process is going on, because then we know that it's not just what the body is going through, there is another layer that needs to be addressed. And that's quite often happening with, like, for example, lower back pain or even some shoulder pain, and really trying to understand if there's other limitations that that person is setting for themselves almost, which is not necessarily coming from their training, but from other beliefs that they may have about the training or about the exercises, and try to kind of educate them and take them back to training.
Excellent. Yeah, so find out what their beliefs are. And again, there's parallels there with running, because once you get a community, there's going to be loads of chat and chit chat and recommendations from fellow athletes who they can presume because they do that, it's going to work for me. So very interesting. And of course, you two are, well, you already provide courses that are Recover Strong, but you're putting something else together as well, are you, which could benefit soft tissue therapists?
Yeah, right now we're putting together a course for just treating CrossFit athletes. So we're still trying to scale it so we can get it into a day or a weekend, because there's so much to cover. And we're trying to get it together because Sonia has a something big going on in her life the next few months. So
I'm not sure. It's a secret, is it? Hasn't been. This is giving an exclusive for the Sports Therapy Association podcast.
I don't know if it's a secret. It's not a secret, Sonia.
No, it's not a secret.
Yeah, but yeah. So Sonia has a baby coming. So
congratulations.
Yeah, and she's still lifting. She could probably still deadlift more than me.
I've seen it before. I remember I was quite young, Les Mills kind of exercise studio, and I remember seeing somebody in a step class, waters breaking as she's delivering the class. And she had to leave that day because she's about to have a baby, still doing the up, down. It was incredible. Oh, fantastic. Congratulations, Sonia. I'm very, very pleased. Is that your first? To be your first, is that?
Yes, yeah.
Exciting. Do you know if a boy or girl?
No.
Not yet.
I'm keeping a surprise for now. Yes.
Fantastic! How exciting! All right, so that might get in the way of a few little plans, maybe potentially. But this is your kind of collaboration, is it, to provide a course?
We have been working under the Recover Stronger brand, and we are trying to develop these courses really to kind of show therapists out there how CrossFit can actually help their patients with recovery. Like what Rob was saying earlier about the fact that it's really community based, so there's gonna be a lot more motivation to keep training, and we can actually use that for rehab, and then to educate therapists on what the common injuries are, what the common exercises are, and how we can scale them, change them, and use variations so that people can keep training, because we know that just resting most injuries is not actually beneficial, so that they can help their patients that want to do CrossFit, want to be involved in CrossFit, recover faster and stronger.
Fantastic. And if people want to stay in touch and find out about the development of these courses, then what's the best way of staying in touch with you guys?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram. It's at Jacked Chiro, JACKED Chiro. Yeah. And we'll keep you updated on that. And then Sonia's.
Mine is sonia.recoverstronger, and there's a link in my bio as well where you can sign up for a waiting list to know more about the courses and when they're relaunched.
Fantastic. And obviously those details will go into the show notes for this, which you'll be able to see hopefully on your podcast app, or if not, you can go to the STA.co.uk, the STA.co.uk website, and all the show notes are on there as well. Fantastic. And based on your experience and the fact you're coaches and therapists, which is such a healthy relationship, it'll be exciting to hear about these courses when they start, and we'll make sure that they are listed in the on the STA as well. How exciting. Look, I feel a little bit guilty that we haven't even talked about different types of it. There's so much we could have talked about, but this was the introductory part. You've done a grand job of introducing CrossFit. I think we've accomplished what we wanted to, in the sense of going from what it used to be and then saying what it is now, and defeating a few misconceptions and things. It's quite exciting, I think. It's an area where I feel that a lot of therapists could help their clients by suggesting to the right client this might be something to get involved in, for all the reasons you've stated. But I love the idea of the play, and it's healthy, isn't it, to have a little bit of competition, because that's how kids compete. Sure, they cry afterwards and they sulk for a few minutes, but competing is part of progression, isn't it? Getting stronger and learning. It's a healthy thing, which as adults sometimes we kind of shy away from. You mustn't compete. It's not a competition. Well, it is. Life is a bit of a competition. So yeah, really good, guys. I thank you very, very much. Normally I'd say now, got any plans? But Sonia, it sounds like you've got your plans. I'm so excited now. This might not be interesting in the podcast, but I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, so it's like I'm a broody. I love the idea of another one, but when's it due? How long are we talking? You didn't show at all at Therapy Expo. It must be like 8 months away.
No, it's beginning of April.
Seriously? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, you covered that up well.
Still training, so yeah, I'm not showing as much as most people for almost 7 months. Yeah. Gosh,
I'm so happy for you. That's so lovely. Great. Rob, you can't beat that in terms of excitement, but what, you got any interesting plans coming up?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I have going on is in the last year, since February, I've been a lecturer at London South Bank University. And we have an integrated master's program where we teach our chiropractic students with sports rehab and physiotherapy. So it's a pretty brand new program. We'll be graduating our first class at the end of this year or this summer. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. And they have exams next week. So they're a little bit, my students are a little nervous right now.
Very nice, exciting. And it's always nice to hear, again, chiropractors. We could do a whole episode on chiropractors because you come from a trade which has got myths and misconceptions. Old school chiropractors, they still think you're kind of following the procedures which were laid out in 1830 or something. You guys have moved on. Who would have thought since 1830? So it's lovely being able to recommend a chiropractor who's moved with the times and defeats that kind of myth, that stereotype which a lot of people have of chiropractors. So thanks for that as well. Right, guys, you two don't go away. I'm going to say goodbye to the people who are joining us live and people listening to the podcast. We'll be back next Tuesday for part 2 of this CrossFit month on the Sports Therapy Association podcast. I'm not sure who the guests are. I've got a few lined up. We're just sorting out times and dates and things. But we will be back here for part 2 of CrossFit here on the STA podcast next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. If you're listening to the podcast, because I managed to get it out, hopefully I'll get it out in a couple of days, and you fancy coming joining us live, then, like I say, Sports Therapy Association Facebook page or YouTube channel, or you don't have to join up with any group. There's no money or anything. You simply just come and join in, and you can network with people here and get to ask the questions face to face to our wonderful guests. So Sonia Fierro, thank you very much. Robert Crowley, thank you so much. Like I say, stick around. I'll say thank you to you personally. But for now, from the Sports Therapy Association podcast, that's it. We'll see you next Tuesday. And thanks as always to